think it's important to fix the trenches? I'll tell you in just a second here on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Jags.
You are Locked On Jags, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up? What's going on? What's happening, man? Good people here on a Tuesday. I am Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars. I appreciate you making this podcast your first listen of the day and reminding you that we're free on all platforms. And wherever you get podcasts, make sure you like and subscribe. I'm going to adjust this camera a little bit today. Now, I'm going to talk about the trenches. I'm not going to talk about trenches because I had a Twitter beef with anyone. I'm going to talk about trenches because I think it's absolutely important, and I do think it's going to be a priority for Doug Pederson, the new Jaguars head coach, and his staff, to not only, I don't think it's the worst unit on the team, but I think it's, as a unit, to me, it's the most important unit. I know a former coach said that the defensive line, in his opinion, is one of the things he looked at. Urban Meyer said that he wants the defensive line to be one of the top 30, in the top 25% of the league, and that's the first thing he looks at. I've heard Nick Saban say in the past that the first thing that he pays attention to when he builds a staff is who his offensive line coach is going to be. So that would probably be where I fall in the line, and I agree with, because I think the offensive line and the trenches are that important for a number of reasons why I think it's important. So we'll go over that today. I'll be very, very particular and specific about what I say so that we don't have a misunderstanding about how I feel about that. We're also going to discuss some prospects outside of Evan Neal. In segment 3, we're going to go over that, some prospects who I think the Jaguars could take a long, hard look at. And then we're going to compare and contrast between the Jags and other people, other teams that have been successful, and what those teams have been able to do with the offensive line in the last 5 years, since 2018. Speaking of 2018, that's the year things started to fall back off track for the Jaguars. They were only on track for 1 year, 2017. And Jag fans, we all thought that because of the young talent on the team, okay, we're in for a little bit of a run, a little bit of a ride, and we're going to be able to. They went to the AFC Championship game and were winning in the fourth quarter, so it would lend you to think that there was some room or a chance that at some point the Jaguars were going to have a chance over the next few years to hang around and be back. Well, we all know it wasn't true. Things, looking back in hindsight, things sort of fell apart in the 2018 season. And they've been derailed ever since. The Jaguars now in their third coach since 2018 season. Their third, I believe, leader in that respect. If they hire a senior VP, which they're probably going to do, because they had Coughlin, and then it was it was Coughlin, it was Caldwell. This will be the fourth leader if they get a new senior EVP. So they have a fourth leader since 2018. So none of that stuff is sustainable for long-term success. So what does the offensive line have to do with that? Let me tell you my philosophy. My philosophy is if you don't have a quarterback that can throw, at least you ought to be able to run, right? And for your offensive line to be one-dimensional or your team to be one-dimensional, there almost has to be an element of, we know that you know what we're going to do, but you still can't stop it. Like it was in 2017 when everybody knew that we could not throw the football, but the offensive line made it irrelevant, the fact that they could run the ball because they played with the way that they played that year. So we have to understand that a lot of that is mentality. A lot of it is also talent. And a lot of it is also based on what type of player you have at those positions. But it's important, too, for me, because when you look at the 53-man roster, when you look at the way teams are built, there are a couple of positions that you have more bodies at that position than any other position. It's obviously offensive and defensive line. They're usually 9 or 10 kept. And defensive backs, there's usually 9 of those guys kept, maybe 10, depending on how the team is made up. But you play 4 at a time with the DBs, and with the line, you play either 3 or 4. And I'm not going to even include Josh Allen as a lineman because he's always been listed as a linebacker. But these numbers might shock you a little bit. I'm just talking about draft picks right now. Since 2018 draft, that's 18, 19, 20, 21. That's 4 years. The Jaguars have used 7 draft picks on defensive backs. 7. They also traded away Jalen Ramsey in I think it was 2019. So they used 7 picks on defensive backs. And just last season, they used 2 priority free agent additions on defensive backs. So if you just count those 2, that'd be 9. That's 9 guys since 2018. And usually a team keeps 9, right? And defensive back is still a need. That's money that's currency that you can't get back. On the defensive line, even though they run a 3-4 now, the Jaguars, and like I said, I'm not including Josh Allen because he's listed as a linebacker. The Jaguars have drafted 6 defensive linemen when you count ends and people that put their hand on the ground every single play. They've also used priority resources last year in free agency in acquiring Malcolm Brown, and they also signed Roy Robertson Harris. So that's 8. I'm not even going back to the other years with free agency. That's 8. I'm just going to assume that because free agents are 2 and 3 year deals. So mainly, even if the deal is longer than that, it's usually a 2 or 3 year deal with avoidable years. So I could go back to 2020, but I ain't going to do y'all like that. So the Jaguars have added 8 priority free agents, 6 through the draft. In that same period, the Jaguars have drafted 4 linebackers, and usually only 2 play at a time. All right. But even if you include Josh Allen, he's one of them. They've drafted 4 wide receivers. They've drafted 4 quarterbacks. And they've drafted 4 offensive linemen on a unit. In one of your units where you have the most people, just like DB and just like defensive line, the Jacksonville Jaguars have drafted 4 offensive linemen since 2018. So what's the big deal? You ain't spending enough money, time, and development on that unit. And obviously they aren't very good because about 3 of those guys aren't even going to probably play for the team this year. Maybe. There's only one guy you will really look at and go, wow, he's great. A rookie who played 4 games, who started 4 games last year, you'll go, okay, we got something to work with. That's pathetic. That's absolutely pathetic, and I think it changes under Doug Pederson. I'm going to compare and contrast to some teams, and you might be shocked. Some teams that are really, really good, guess what? Their numbers are about the same as Jacksonville's. I'm going to tell you who those teams are here on Locked On Jaguars, and then I'm going to tell you what I think might be the significance of comparing and contrasting with those teams. And I'll do it in segment number 2 here on Locked On Jaguars. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college. You got guys fighting in college and stuff, hitting 3-pointers all over the place. It's a lot of stuff to go through, and you don't need to do it on your own. You need to go to where you can find the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fire coach is going to be and land or not land in the case of Juwan Howard, who did not get fired. But betonline.net is the #1 spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all the sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC, all the odds right now, and even the things that are going on in the Olympic coverage and all of the information you may need on that. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline is where the game starts. And you guys start here with me every single day on Locked On Jaguars, and we are grateful for that. The podcast is growing, man. You know, it's like we're growing, not just me. You know, all of us are growing together, and we, get this organic content every day because it's your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. I was talking about the offensive line, and I know I might have shocked you guys knowing the Jaguars only drafted 4 offensive linemen since 2018. And going by the attitude that a lot of people have when I talk about that they probably should use a high draft pick on Evan Neal, y'all would have probably been right there with him. It sounds like y'all in the scouting department when y'all want to fuss at me about an offensive lineman. If you're going to argue me about Evan Neal, fine. If you don't like him, I don't care. That's not it. And people always go, well, it's just my opinion. It's not your opinion when you state something that's wrong. I'm just let you know that right now. If you say that kid never played left tackle, and that is what you're basing your opinion on, then you're just wrong. He did play left tackle. Now, it doesn't mean that you think that he's going to translate to a left tackle in the NFL, but you cannot do that and not expect some pushback. And that's not an opinion, okay? It's not an opinion. That's wrong because it's based on a lie. It's not true. It's like me saying that it's hot today in Cincinnati. If I ain't there or somebody ain't showing me what the temperature is, I can't base an opinion on something I don't know or base an opinion on an assumption that I make because it's a lie. All right? So let's have fun, man, and stop taking everything so seriously. But I looked at Baltimore and I looked at Kansas City, and I didn't go throughout the league. And I said the Jaguars' numbers seem like they're depressingly low for that position that has such a priority and where they keep such a big number of it on their final 53. So let me look at these other teams. Well, I looked at KC, and KC has only used 5 draft picks on players in that same time period. And Baltimore has used 5 or 6, I think it was 6, on players during that same time period. And I'm like, well, that's only one more than the Jaguars. So how can I use this number to sort of justify the fact that they've kind of ignored that spot, that they've kind of not prioritized getting offensive linemen? Here's why: because they missed on the guys that they chose. The other teams, they didn't. Kansas City got 2 guys just last year that are starting on their football team. And they got a guy in Zeus Brown, who is Baby Zeus, who's a starter at left tackle. So they actually added 3 priority players, and those players actually have the line, and they're in real good shape with Trey, the kid from Tennessee, Trey Smith, and with the center that they got from Oklahoma last year. They're in good shape. The difference with the Jaguars is the guys the Jaguars got, they about to run them off because they ain't no good. Baltimore seems like they're a factory. How come they haven't drafted more people? I'm going to give you an idea of why Baltimore haven't drafted more people. Because the guys they already had on the team were pretty damn good. That's why they haven't drafted more people since 2018. So they've just been putting guys behind them like Ben Cleveland, and those guys can play. Those guys are people that Baltimore is going to hang on to. One of them, in fact, is Orlando Brown's Zeus, Baby Zeus. He was one of the picks, but he's now in Kansas City getting ready to get a lot of money. And they were able to make him expendable because they draft and develop guys. And the reason why I think it's so important that you get this right and that you go through all of, aside from the fact that you need him to protect your franchise quarterback, aside from the fact that you need to be able to run the ball to keep pressure off your franchise quarterback, aside from the fact that it allows you to control a game more than any other thing, aside from the fact that it's the one unit on your team that if it's messed up, will jack your whole team up. Aside all of that, which are all damn good reasons, it's also the one unit where the guys have the most longevity as a group. If you get it right, those dudes can possibly play together for 10 years, that entire unit, if you can afford to pay them all. But if you get it right, it's usually right, barring injury, it's usually right for a long period of time. And it's something that the good teams have been able to address, get it right, and then just cherry pick maybe a guy per year and put him on your team. And you don't have to go out and spend a bunch of money in free agency on guys. You already have guys in-house ready to go. It's the one unit. I said unit now, not position, but quarterback. If you get quarterback right, it's right for 15 years. But it's the one group and unit. The thing that has, those guys got to be the Temptations, man. They got to be the 4 tops. They got to be together. And it's the one unit that if you get it right, it stays that way for a long, long time. And it really, really helps your program, and it gives you a chance to win. It's also the one position group where you don't, we keep talking about continuity and we talk about consistency in football and playing football. It's also the one unit where you won't, it's likely that you won't lose your coach. It's very likely that you won't lose. This is the one unit where you might not lose. The defensive line coach probably gonna go be a defensive coordinator. Your defensive backs coach will go be a offensive line coaches don't get that call very much. That goes to the glamour positions. Half the offensive line coaches, they know that Dante Scarnecchia probably always knew he was going to be an offensive. Hudson House going to be an offensive coach forever. You know, Tom Cable's going to be an offensive coach. That's what these guys do. They're offensive coaches. They're offensive line coaches. They ain't got time to be dealing with that. Now, I know the Jaguars had Doug Marrone, but you remember how that happened. That happened because he was promoted. But when we talk about consistency and we talk about camaraderie and we talk about cohesion, that's another word, and we talk about these things, we always talk about the offensive line. I would invest in the offensive line, in those trenches, get young guys in free agency or the draft. Even if you don't take them number one, find a way to draft. There's no way in the last 5 years, especially in, I think 4 of those 5 years, the offensive line, according to the Senior Bowl, the offensive line had the most guys that you could anticipate having 10-year careers, and you don't get one of them. But you're around here signing DBs off free agency and drafting DBs at an out-of-control rate, and then they don't turn out and pan out. So it's critical that they get the right personnel people in here and that you keep swinging at the line, and it can't be average. You can't take over a game and dominate a game. You can win some games with an okay line, but you have to be good at the offensive line position. And I don't believe in looking past the guy who's at the top of the draft because you say you have some sort of positional bias. There's no one on your team, if you're a Jacksonville Jaguar fan, outside of Trevor Lawrence, maybe Brandon Linder. But there's no one else that you can say is good enough that you can't draft on top of him if you think the guy's that good. Impossible. And I don't hear nothing about Walker Little. I like Walker Little too, but Walker Little played 4 games. Or Walker Little missed 2 straight years in college. Walker Little, and then you're not really drafting over him because you need 2 tackles. But even he's not good enough for you as a Jaguar fan to sit here and cherry pick and go, oh, we don't need another guy. We got him. No, you do not. If the other guy's the best player in the draft, then you better take him. He might be, might not be, according to a lot of people's opinions. So I'll talk about that too here on Locked On Jaguars. We'll do it in just a second in segment 3. Gonna mention some names of some players, man. I hope I get them right because a lot of them, they got these weird little vowels in them. So I hope I get it right, but it won't be the first time I mispronounce something. I'll do it in segment 3 here in just a second. Got to tell you about Built Bar, man. Have you tried the puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of the Built Bar's best tasting bars. It's a marshmallow covered in chocolate, but as tasty as you, man, you better try it because I can't even describe it. It's the first ever protein infused marshmallow. It's fluffy. It's marshmallowy. That's what marshmallows are. They're fluffy and marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered, like I said, with 100% chocolate. All Built Bars are covered in 100% chocolate, real chocolate, not the fake stuff. It's 100% real chocolate. Low calorie, high protein. You can replace those candy bars you've been eating, but you can do it without getting all that chalky, waxy feeling of having a protein bar because it actually has the texture of a candy bar. Go to built.com and scroll down to the macros chart, and you'll be blown away by how much protein and how low the calorie intake is for Built Bars. Very high fiber and low carbs. Go to built.com right now and try those puffs, or if you're in the mood to do what I do all the time, yeah, go ahead and find you that salted caramel and see, don't your day get better real fast. So make sure you hit that up at built.com and get your orders. Also, check them out on Twitter at @bar_built for all the latest information. We thank you for joining us and making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. Did y'all hear my voice break at the end of that commercial? Yeah, because I want me a Built Bar so bad. Talking about them just makes me get all squeaky. But we're talking about prospects. We're talking about offensive line prospects and why I believe, as a recap, it's so important to fix your trenches and get them fixed to the point where they're above average. If you got an offensive line, that's an 8. That's real good to me because you got an 8 and you got guys kind of spread out contract-wise a little bit that you can keep them all together because I want that rhythm. I want that consistency. And then if you get the right coach, he probably isn't leaving. He's probably not going to go anywhere, and he's going to stay for a long time. And I do think when you look around the league, you see teams that have that consistent approach. at that position. There's nothing like being able to be really, really good. I remember the Jaguars back in the late 90s and early 2000s when they really, really had it going with Baselli and Cersei and Coleman and Tilsky and Waddell and even Mo Williams. And when he came in a little bit later, man, when they had that thing going with those guys, man, and Manawai and Naoli, it's just like you didn't even worry about the line. And they could run it, they could pass protect, and they could dominate and take over games when they needed to. And I just want to get back to that consistency. But of course, here, most of the Jaguar fans aren't used to that, so they don't understand the importance of it. Let me just break it down to you like this. Think about the teams in college that win all the time. Alabama. Think about the thing that they do this year with UGA, Georgia. Those trenches are absolutely important. Now think about the team you root for who can't seem like they can't get out of the car without tripping over their own feet. I know who mine is, and their offensive line has been terrible over the last half a decade. See, when your line isn't great, sometimes you can take it for granted and not realize just how good the teams are that have those. If your quarterback's having a bad day, run the ball. Run it. Look at the big game that just happened with the Bengals and the Rams. Neither one of those teams have a great offensive line, but one team has a great defensive line, and the defensive line made plays when they had to because nobody really stopped anybody. What happened was, where did you guys make the plays? Now, Aaron Donald's going to make those plays against a lot of people, right? And you still have to give yourself a fighting chance. You have to give yourself a fighting chance. Or you're going to get your quarterback beat up. You're going to constantly be in long down and distance situations. Eventually, guys start getting the jitters and they start jumping with false starts because dude's been whooping them all day. And you're always in 2nd and 15 or 1st and 15. And a lot of times they hold because they're not good. And so now you're in 1st and 20. And you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball too much. When you're good and you can force teams and you can constantly keep yourself in 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, 3rd and 2, the down and distance situations that enable you to win, that means you control the ball. When you control the football, you control the game. And when you control the game, you control field position and you can control, you really mentally get in the head of the other team. So that's why I think the trenches are absolutely important. Do I think you have to use a 1st round pick on the best tackle in the draft? No, you don't. The Giants did it a couple of years ago. They used the 4th pick on Andrew Thomas, and that hasn't really worked out, even though he started playing a little bit better. And the reason why is because you can't just do it with one person, which is why every time somebody talks to me about Walker Little, I'm sitting here like he's one guy. You can't do it with one person. It takes a unit, right? So why is the one unit where you probably should have more people on that unit than anyone, the one that you spend the less resources on? And the only way you can tell me that's justified is if that unit was good, and the unit wasn't good. It was okay. You have to invest in the important areas of your football team. So there are some guys out there this year that we can take a look at outside of Evan Neal. He's not the only dude that people think it is possible to go in the top of the draft. He's not. He's my favorite, but it doesn't mean that he's the only guy. Evan Neal is not the only dude at the top. There's a kid from NC State. I want to make sure I get his name right real quick, so I'm gonna pull it up and I'm gonna look at how you actually pronounce his name, and I'm gonna pull that up for you. But the kid from NC State is supposedly pretty good. I'm gonna tell you some other guys that are good. Charles Cross is a pretty good prospect, and he's a good player from Mississippi State. A little bit undersized. He's a little bit different from Evan Neal, but really, really good player. Now, mind you, and granted, the kid from NC State, the tackle from NC State, he isn't high on everybody's board. His name is Ikem Ikwanu. So, like, there's a board I'm looking at right now. They have him down at 23. Evan Neal is sitting solidly at number 4. Solidly at number 4. So when you start doing your mock drafts, and I want you guys to do this as an exercise, I wouldn't necessarily take a player high because that position is thin, but you almost do it. That's where the positional value comes in, and that's where your value board comes in. And it usually determines whether you stay or move down. You take the best player you can at number 1. Because, like I said, you can't cherry pick. You have to take the guy that you think is the best. And we talked about it yesterday as the guy who is either just the best physical talent or the guy who's the best in terms of how does he change your team? And when you plug him into your team, what does it look like, not just for this year, but say the next decade? And that's why, to me, when I explained it yesterday, I said that I have Evan Neal as my number one player at that position. Now, there are also some really good guards in this year's draft, and some guys will be listed as tackles, but they're actually going to play guard in the NFL. Now, uh, case in point, Will Richardson, who plays for the Jags, and Ben Bartch were listed as tackles when they were drafted. So this makes it even, the point I made in segment one even bigger. They drafted 4 guys that listed as tackle, and 2 of them ended up guards, and two of them still remained at tackle. Taylor and of course Cam Robinson. To me, that's just not enough. When you look at it, they have Brandon Leonard, they still have Brandon Leonard, so you don't need a center. But they've literally, in the last 5 years, taken one guy at each one of those positions and banked on that those guys were going to be the offensive line. And here we are. We got a new regime, and maybe that new regime doesn't feel the same way about those guys. So you look at Kenyon Green, a kid that can play tackle or guard from Texas A&M, 6'4", 330 pounds. I mean, it's one thing to draft a dude that's 6'5" and he's 295 or 305, but you go into the draft getting a guy that's 6'4", 330 pounds and rock solid and ready to go right now. Ikem Ekwonu is the name, and he's listed as a guard here. He's 6'4", 325. I really like Zion Johnson because he can play guard or center, and he could be the guy that 3 years down the line, if Linder is past his prime, you could take the kid from Boston College, Zion Johnson, and make him your senior. Darian Kennard's a big man, 6'5", 345. Didn't move as well at the Senior Bowl as I liked, but he could play as well. Another one real quick, and I'll let this be Jamari Sawyer. You saw him play left tackle for Georgia and do a really, really good job. He projects as a guard. He's 6'4", 325. They might be cheating on that 6'4" because I stood right next to him at the Senior Bowl, and he looked like he was about 6'3", maybe 6'2", and 6'2 and a half, 6'3". But when they go to the combine, if those guys measure out, everyone will have a chance to take a look at and see exactly how big or how tall he is. But he just didn't look as tall as I thought he would. In fact, somebody said he looked like me. He can be my son right now, especially. You get drafted. I ain't feed him, but he can be my son. Evan Neal, 6'7", 360 at tackle. Charles Cross, as I mentioned, 6'5", 300. One of those real athletic guys at 6'5", 300, sort of in the Teron Armstead mode. They've listed Ikem Ekwonu here also at 6'4", 325. Trevor Penning. I did see Trevor Penning. Trevor Penning is a mountain of a man. I think he projects probably at right tackle. He's a kid out of Northern Iowa. 6'7", 321. Nicholas Petty-Frere, I know him from high school, a Florida kid from Ohio State. He's 6'5", 300. And, of course, he's the one on the tape being bull rushed by the tape I saw the most with him getting bull rushed by Aiden Hutchinson. So some of the other guys to take a look out for is Sean Ryan, 6'5", 318 from UCLA. And another small college kid who looks really good, too, is Bernard Raymond. He's from Central Michigan. I know a lot of talk, too, is about this big old kid up at Minnesota. And I don't know where he's going to play. His name is Daniel Fa'ali or Fa'alili. Now, let me tell you, I saw him in person. He's one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen. He's bigger than Evan Neal. Evan Neal, 6'7", 360. This kid is 6'8", 380. And he's not fat. He has a little bit of a gut, but he's not fat. He's just his legs are like California redwood tree trunks, man. They're huge. It's going to be interesting to see. They have him rated a little bit lower here, but some people, if the Jags don't go early, he'll be one of those guys that's the type of player that might be at the top of the second round that folks want to really take a long, hard look at. All right, man. So I've gone through some draft picks here or potential draft picks for Jacksonville. I don't care where they draft a guy at. I just need them to get maybe somebody in free agency, but then make sure that they add people also in the NFL draft, young guys that they got to hit on them. They can play and be developed. And if you get that right, the Jaguars will be better off because over the long haul, it's the unit that you can maintain the most consistency with players and coaches. So you want to find more out about linemen? Here's what you do. Go and make your second listen to Locked On NFL Draft podcast with my buddies Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker. I was hanging out with those guys at the Senior Bowl, and man, I saw their workflow. And let me tell you something, they get after it, and you're going to really, really enjoy the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Make sure you listen to it every day wherever you get your podcast, like and subscribe and make that your second listen, because they do such a great job. They both take a different approach. Ryan's very much in analytics, and Crocker has played the game, and he talks from a very good player perspective that'll let you know what guys can and cannot do. All right, man, this is your man Tony Wiggins here with Locked On Jaguars podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you guys take care of each other as always, and we'll see you tomorrow again with another edition of Locked On Jaguars.